All right, let's dive right in. We're heading to the heart of our own galaxy for a pretty wild story. It's a story about cosmic destruction, sure, but it's also about a really bizarre kind of creation. Because it turns out the most violent places in the universe might just be the most creative.
So let's start with a question that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. Can a black hole actually create a planet? I know, right? We always think of them as these cosmic vacuum cleaners that only ever devour things. But what if they're also responsible for launching brand new planet-sized worlds across the galaxy? That's the mystery we're unpacking today.
And get this isn't some theory about a galaxy far, far away. We're talking about our own cosmic backyard. It's all centered on the supermassive black hole right at the heart of the Milky Way. It's a story about a monster that has a very strange and very creative habit.
Okay, so let's properly meet the main character in all of this. Its formal name is Sagittarius A star, but for our purposes, you can just think of it as our galaxy's resident monster. Sagittarius A star, or SGA for short, is basically the anchor of our entire galaxy. It's this incredibly dense point in space, about 26,000 light years away from us. And most of the time, it's a pretty quiet giant. It just sits there. But every once in a while, it gets hungry.
Just to give you a sense of scale here, SGRA weighs as much as 4.3 million of our suns all rolled into one. It is a true behemoth. But like I said, it's usually dormant. It's not actively feeding. The real show begins when some poor, unsuspecting star wanders just a little too close. And that brings us to the action. What actually happens when a star strays into the monster's lair? Well, the answer is one of the most wonderfully named and unbelievably violent processes in all of astronomy. The whole thing is called a tidal disruption event. So first, a star gets pulled in. Then, the black hole's gravity is so much stronger on the near side of the star than the far side that it gets stretched and stretched and stretched apart, like cosmic taffy. Yep, that's spaghettification. About half of that stellar spaghetti gets slurped up by the black hole, which causes this huge flare of light. The other half, it gets violently thrown out into space at mind-boggling speeds. Now, the important thing to remember here is that a TDE, as it's called, is a signature event. That bright flash of light is the evidence. It's how astronomers can witness these otherwise invisible giants having a meal. And it's what sets the stage for the creation that's about to happen. But don't expect to see one of these every week. In a galaxy like our own Milky Way, a TDE only happens maybe once every 10,000 to 100,000 years. That rarity is what makes each one a super precious opportunity for scientists to study these extreme events. So this brings us to the core idea. We've seen the total destruction of a star, but now let's look at the absolutely bizarre creation that might follow, all thanks to a fascinating hypothesis from just a few years ago. So, back in 2017, a researcher named Eden Girma showed off some simulations that were pretty mind-blowing. That long stream of star guts that gets flung into space, the leftovers from the black hole's meal, it doesn't just fade away. The theory is that this stream can break apart into these dense clumps, which then collapse under their own gravity, forming thousands of Jupiter-sized balls of gas. The black hole literally spits out these new objects. And we're not talking about just a handful here. A single shredded star could theoretically produce a staggering number of these things. The simulations suggest as many as 11,000 of these spitballs could be born from just one event. And check out the power we're talking about. These newborn worlds are launched at speeds up to 10,000 kilometers per second. That is so ridiculously fast that they can easily escape the gravity of the entire Milky Way. They're destined to become lonely wanderers in the massive void between galaxies. Now, it's really important to get this. These aren't planets like Jupiter. A regular gas giant forms slowly, over millions of years, building up a complex structure, probably with a rocky core. These spitballs are totally different. They form in just a couple of years from the raw material of a star, so mostly just hydrogen and helium. They're simple, gassy blobs shot out into the darkness with no star to call home. So, if our galaxy's black hole has been doing this for billions of years, well, that begs a pretty obvious question, right? Where are all these things? And that leads us to the next part of our story, the cosmic detective work. Exactly. If just one TDE can create thousands of them, and this has been happening over and over for eons, there should be tens, maybe hundreds of millions of these things flying around out there. So,
Where are they? Well, it turns out finding them is insanely difficult. For one, they cool down really fast, which makes them very faint and hard to see. Two, their crazy speed makes them just a blur against the stars, almost impossible to track. And finally, they're scattered across the unimaginable emptiness of space. So as of right now, this is still a brilliant theory, but we haven't actually found one yet. But astronomers are not giving up. They've got a couple of tricks up their sleeve for the future. Really powerful infrared telescopes might be able to spot the faint heat these objects are still giving off. Or they could use a clever trick called microlensing, where a spitball's gravity would briefly magnify the light of a distant star as it passes by, like a cosmic magnifying glass. So, why does this wild theory about stellar spitballs even matter? It's more than just a cool piece of cosmic trivia. It really changes how we think about the cycle of life and death for objects in our galaxy. And this is really the big takeaway. This theory gives us a completely new recipe for making rogue planets, worlds that just wander through space without a sun. We think there are billions of these lonely worlds out there, and this process could explain where a whole bunch of the fastest ones come from. It shows us that these destructive events, TDEs, are also creative. They're part of a dynamic cycle, recycling stars into new forms and shaping the whole galactic neighborhood. Which really brings us back to this beautiful, kind of poetic central theme, that the most destructive force we know of in our galaxy, a supermassive black hole, might also be a powerful engine of creation, forging new worlds from the ashes of dead stars. And it just leaves you with this final amazing thought. If our galaxy's monster can do this, what other strange and wonderful processes are out there creating unseen worlds? What other rogue planets, born from fire and fury, are right now wandering silently through the cosmic dark?